Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Amin Syed bin Zunaidi. My material number 30DLS22F1036. Today I want present about warehouse safety. First, I want talk about overview of warehouse safety. First, hazard identification. Purpose, the first step in hierarchy is to identify potential hazard within the warehouse environment that could cause harm to employees, visitor or property. Method, regular inspection. Conduct routine inspection of the warehouse to identify hazard such as slippery floor, damaged equipment or improperly stored material. Employee input. Encourage employee to report potential hazard they encounter during their work. Second, risk assessment. Purpose, once hazard are identified, assess the risk associated with each hazard to determine the likelihood and severity of potential harm. Criteria likelihood is how likely is it that the hazard will cause harm. Severity, what could be the consequence or impact of the hazard. Example, minor injury, major injury, fatality. Third, exposure, how often and to what extent are individual exposed to the hazard. Risk matrix. Use a risk matrix to categorize risk based on likelihood and severity, prioritizing those that pose the high risk. 3. Risk control. Purpose, implement measure to control and mitigate, identify risk to reduce the likelihood and severity of harm. Hierarchy control, elimination, remove the hazard together. Example, replace a hazardous chemical with safer alternative. Second, substitution. Substitute the hazard with something less hazardous. Example, using non-slip floor coating. Engineering control, implement physical changes or modification. Example, installing machine guard. Administrative control, implement policy and procedure. Example, implement safe work practices, providing training. Personal protective equipment, PPE, provide appropriate PPE based on identify risk. Example, safety helmet, Google and glove. The fourth one is integration with warehouse safety management. Policy and procedure incorporate the finding of the hierarchy process into warehouse safety policy procedure. Second, training and communication. Ensure the employee are trained on identify hazard, associate risk and control measure. Third, regular review and update. Periodically review and update the hierarchy process to account for changes in the warehouse environment, equipment or work practices. Continuous improvement. Use the result of hierarchy to continuously improve warehouse safety and prevent accident. Safety policy. First, purpose and objective. Clearly state the purpose of the safety policy, emphasizing the commitment to providing a safe workplace. Define specific objectives such as reducing accident, preventing injuries and ensuring compliance with relevant safety regulation. Second, responsibilities. Define the role and responsibilities of management, supervisor and employees in maintaining safety. Specify who is accountable for implementing and enforcing safety procedure. conducting training and investigating incident. Third, risk management. Emphasize the importance of hazard identification, risk assessment, and risk control measure. Outline procedure for regular inspection, risk assessment, and mitigation strategy. 4. Safety procedure. Provide detailed guidelines for safe warehouse operation, including material handling, equipment usage, and emergency procedure. Specify good for loading and unloading, stacking and storage of goods, and pedestrian safety. Safety regulation. First, Occupational Safety and Health Act 1994, OSHA 1994. Purpose, the primary legislation governing occupational safety and health in Malaysia. Key provision. Establish legal obligation for employers, employee, manufacturer, and designer to ensure safety and health at workplace. Define responsibility for hazard identification, risk assessment, and implementation of control measure. Set guideline for safety committees, safety officer, and safety health training. Second, Factory and Machineries Act 1967. Purpose, regulate factories, machinery, and other equipment used in workplace to ensure safety. Key provision. It requires licensing and inspection of factories and machinery to ensure compliance with safety standards. Set out specific safety requirements for various types of machinery and equipment. Establish guidelines for the construction, maintenance, and operation of factories and machinery. Third, guideline for specific industry. DOSH provide specific guideline and codes of practice tailored to different industry to address sector-specific safety and health concern. Example includes guideline for construction, manufacturing, healthcare, agriculture, and hazardous industry like chemical processing. 4. Noise Exposure Regulation 2019. Address occupational noise exposure to prevent hearing loss and other health issues caused by excessive noise in workplace. Set permissible exposure limit and requirement for noise monitoring, control measure, and provision of hearing protection. 4. Chemical Management Regulation. Regulation under DOSH govern the safe handling, storage, use, and transportation of hazardous chemical. Require employer to conduct chemical risk assessment, provide training, and implement control measures to protect workers from chemical hazard. 6. OSH Classification, Labeling, Safety Data Sheet of Hazardous Chemical Regulation 2013. Govern the classification, labeling, and provision of safety data sheet for hazardous chemical use in workplace. Ensure consistent and standardized communication of chemical hazard to protect worker handling substance. Diagram of risk assessment stage. First, hazard identification. Purpose, identify potential hazard that could cause harm in workplace. Activities like conduct inspection and walkthroughs of the workplace, review incident report and historical data, engage employees to identify known and potential hazards. Second, risk assessment. Purpose, evaluate the identified hazard to determine the level of risk associated with each hazard. Activity, assess the likelihood of occurrence and severity of consequences for each hazard. use a risk matrix or scoring system to prioritize risk based on their potential impact. Consider factors such as exposure, vulnerability, and existing control. Third, risk control. Purpose: implement measure to control and mitigate the identified risk. Activity: apply the hierarchy of control. First, elimination: remove the hazard entirely. Second, substitution: replace the hazard with something less risky. Engineering control: modify equipment or process to minimize risk. 4. Administrative control: implement policy and procedure to reduce exposure. 5. Personal protective equipment (PPE). Provide appropriate PPE as a last line of defense. Develop and implement control measure based on the risk assessment finding, and monitor and review the effectiveness of control regularly. Lastly, hazard implementation in warehouse. First, hazard identification. Purpose: the first step is to systematically identify potential hazard present in the warehouse environment that could cause harm to personnel, equipment, or property. Method: regulation inspection. Conduct routine inspection of the warehouse facility, equipment, and work process to identify hazard such as slippery floor or spill, obstruct pathway or isle, unstable stacking of goods, poorly maintained machinery or forklift, exposure to hazardous substance such as chemical and farmers. Employee input: encourage warehouse staff to report any hazard or near miss incident they observe during their work. Second, risk assessment. Purpose: once hazard are identified, assess the risk associated with each hazard to determine the likelihood and severity of potential harm. Criteria: likelihood, like evaluate how probable it is that the hazard will cause harm. Severity: assess the potential consequences or impact of the hazard on individual, equipment, or operation. Exposure: consider the frequency and duration of exposure to the hazard. Risk matrix: use a risk matrix to prioritize identify risk based on their likelihood and severity, categorizing them into low, medium, or high risk level.